If you passed under Oshodi Bridge on a sweltering afternoon in Lagos, you'd see a storm of lives swirling together. Traders slinging bargains, motorcycles weaving through traffic like shadows, and the unending hum of cars overhead blurring into the horizon. But woven into this chaos, out of sight yet aching to be noticed, there was a frail figure, a thin elderly woman, folded into herself against the dusty concrete, ignored like a faded mural of yesterday's pain. People moved with unbroken purpose, avoiding her with practiced eyes, each step a silent dismissal. Nobody stopped, not even long enough to offer her a glance. Nobody except Amara. Amara's story didn't begin as a tale of hardship. That day, she knelt on dusty ground in an old ash-gray dress that had seen better years, its hem darkened with the same dirt as her world. Her hair spilled messily around her tired face, framing the quiet determination that kept her moving through days most wouldn't survive. Lessons bloom. In her hands, she clutched what many would pass as insignificant: a small takeaway container of spicy jollof rice and a bottle of water, the only meal she'd see all day. Its scent both comforting and cruel in her hunger. But Amara's hunger was secondary. The ache her heart carried was deeper than any rumble in her stomach. As the sun blazed and Lagos pulsed above and around her, Amara crept toward the forgotten woman, her steps a silent question to the world. What kind of person am I if I look away? Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? The woman on the ground could barely muster enough breath to respond. Her lips had dried like autumn leaves, cracked and brittle, her eyelids sunken, fluttering uncertainly. Amara, with care unfamiliar to the harshness of the streets, eased the old woman's narrow shoulders onto her lap. No audience watched. The city's rhythm never faltered. Cars roared, voices laughed, footsteps walked past, all while the quiet act of kindness unfolded beneath the bridge. With trembling hands, Amara unpacked her precious food, scooped out a spoonful, and blew on it gently, as though each grain carried hope. "Please try," she murmured, her voice brimming with desperation and resolve. The woman obeyed, swallowing with labored effort, every mouthful a test of will, every bite a statement of survival. Around them, life went on, untouched, indifferent. Someone laughed harshly, another grumbled about beggars. Yet Amara did not falter. She fed, she coaxed, she waited. When the meal disappeared and only memories of comfort remained, Amara opened the bottle, tipping it softly at the woman's cracked lips. Water spilled, some into her mouth, some dribbling down her chin, until at last breath returned and words slipped free, weak but fierce. "Thank you, my daughter. You saved me." Amara held her tighter, feeling the fragile pulse beneath her arms. A reminder that compassion, even if small, could interrupt even the deepest suffering. "Do you have anyone I can call?" Amara whispered, searching the woman's face for signs of hope. The old woman blinked slowly, the effort to remember drawing every ounce of strength she still possessed. Then, like a bridge built out of memories, she spoke, reciting a phone number digit by digit, tasting each like a lifeline. Amara's heart thudded in her chest, the future precarious and uncertain, balanced on the edge of the connection she was about to make. From a battered plastic bag, Amara fished out her tiny cell phone, its screen splintered by years of neglect. Her hands trembled as she dialed, praying with each ring that someone on the other end would answer, someone who cared enough to change this moment. The call connected, a deep and measured voice responding, masking fear beneath calm. "Who is this?" Amara inhaled, summoning courage from the dusty depths of her day. "My name is Amara," she announced. "I found your mother under the Oshodi Bridge. She's weak. I gave her my food, but she needs help. Please come." The silence that followed stretched painfully until finally urgency cut through. "Stay with her." "I'm on my way." Hope, fragile but real, flickered between Amara and the woman whose world she'd entered. "Your son is coming," Amara said softly, cradling her gently as the old woman tried and failed to keep her eyes open. But before this moment, before Jollof rice became salvation, before frantic calls wove new connections, Amara's story had taken her through promise and loss, once not so long ago. She was a girl with the sun in her eyes and a future that gleamed as brightly as the new dress she planned to wear for her graduation. Her parents' promises still echoed in her memory. They would clap the loudest, take photos before the school gate in Surulere, and beam with pride as Amara claimed her prize as best student. She rehearsed her smile, perfected her stance, anticipating that celebration. But fate is unpredictable, and life in Lagos can pivot cruelly around a single event. Instead of applause, there was a crash. Tires skidding, metal shrieking, followed by neighbors crowding at her door. Panic chased her through sterile hallways of a hospital. Whispers replaced laughter, and suddenly, all the promises dissolved. Darkness swallowed her days, each hour colder and longer than the last. Amara's world grew smaller as she watched her dreams break, each jagged piece echoing the betrayal she'd soon face. Her aunt Adana arrived with clothes as stiff as her heart, and her uncle Namdi's words slid out, smooth and oily, leaving only discomfort behind. Grief gave way to greed. They told everyone Amara's late father owed them money, sold the family house without remorse, and pocketed the scraps that remained. When Amara pleaded, asking where she might sleep, their response was a slammed gate and a turned back. Her fate left to Lagos's indifferent streets. That first night was a lesson in cruel survival. Amara clung to her school bag at the bus stop, her only shield against the biting chill and the fear of being forgotten. Days blurred into harsh routine, waking early to claim a safe corner before others could, watching her belongings with desperate vigilance. begging for a few naira or shared scraps of food, hoping, sometimes in vain, for gestures of kindness. On rare occasions, kindness appeared in small packages: a bowl of leftover rice, a crust of bread, a half-empty bottle of water. Often it didn't appear at all. Through it all, a single hungry hope burned inside Amara, a secret ambition she tried to keep safe from the winds of misfortune. She still dreamed of healing others, of wearing the immaculate white coat of a doctor, of uttering words that would save lives. But in the shadowed world under bridges, dreams often suffocate, gasping for air that never comes. Amara's journey through the underbelly of Lagos was punctuated by moments of both despair and unexpected strength. The city itself seemed to be both obstacle and witness, a sprawling metropolis that didn't pause for anyone's story. Each day under the bridge sharpened her resilience, sculpting her spirit into something both raw and unbreakable. Sometimes she caught glimpses of her old life reflected in the polished windows of passing cars. A split-second vision of comfort and belonging drifting by before vanishing into the distance. Evenings were the hardest. As the sun retreated, the world grew colder and shadows sharpened with threats. Amara would sometimes press her back against the concrete, closing her eyes to conjure up the voices of her parents, loving, encouraging, hopeful. It was in these delicate moments that she allowed herself to remember the promises they'd made, replaying every detail, desperate to extract warmth from memories that refused to fade. Sometimes, kind strangers dropped coins in her lap. Sometimes they didn't. The unpredictability of human compassion taught her to anchor herself in hope rather than expectation. Yet, in the heart of Lagos, even hope was a luxury. Still, Amara clung to hers, determined not to succumb. She made silent promises to herself. One day, she would get up from this concrete. She would find a way back. Her story wouldn't be just another sad tale swept away by the city's indifference. There were other souls under the bridge. Amara wasn't invisible to everyone. A few regulars became fleeting companions. A boy named Tunde, with clever hands and a mischievous grin, hustling for coins in the market. An elderly man, known only as Baba, who protected his patch with tales of a Nigeria that once was. And Mariam, a teenage girl with shy eyes, who offered silent solidarity in moments when words felt heavy. Together, they formed an unspoken pact, a makeshift family forged not by blood, but by the necessity of survival. Real family could betray, forget, or disappear, but those who suffered together learned to recognize each other's pain as their own. When someone managed to gather extra food or some naira, they shared, always mindful that tomorrow could be different. Their friendship was both armor and balm, shielding them from the relentless cold of both night and human neglect. Yet, as days and weeks passed, Amara remained set apart. Her dreams of medical school, of redemption and dignity, made her different, marked by a quiet yearning that the others respected but rarely understood. Sometimes Tunde would tease, "Dr. Amara, have you cured anyone today?" And she would laugh, a brief sparkle amidst routine hardship. But every smile was laced with sorrow, a reminder of all she'd lost and all she still hoped to find. Then, one wet morning, something changed. Amara woke to the harsh clamor of rain battering against the bridge above. Rivers of dirty water snaked around sleeping forms, threatening to flood their sanctuary. She hurriedly gathered her few belongings, her school bag, an old notebook, a battered pencil, and a wrinkled photograph of her parents. The rain felt almost cleansing, as if the city was trying to wash away not only the dust, but the hurt that clung to them. The old woman she'd helped days before had become a recurring figure in her thoughts. Her gaunt face haunted Amara. She wondered if she had survived, if her son had come quickly enough to save her. There was in this uncertainty a growing sense of purpose. Amara realized that her compassion could ripple outward, touching lives that, like her own, were suspended over the edge. That day, driven by restless energy, she roamed farther than usual, slipping into markets, trying her luck with bus drivers, watching crowds with new eyes. She wasn't just searching for food. She was searching for a sign, for a reason to believe that her actions mattered in the grand mesh of the city's fate. The stories told by her companions echoed in her mind. Baba's nostalgia for gentler times, Mariam's whispered memories of home lost in a village fire, Tunde's dreams of escape. Each of them nursed a flame. Amara's burned brightest with the hope of healing. That flame was stoked further by unexpected generosity. Later that week, as Amara begged near a busy intersection, a woman in a bright yellow blouse paused, studying her with genuine concern. Without saying a word, she handed Amara a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, the first complete meal she'd had in days. The gesture was simple, but for Amara, it was monumental. A reminder that kindness could break through even the thickest walls of urban indifference. Grateful, Amara shared the sandwich with her companions, earning a rare chorus of laughter and stories. Baba regaled them with tales of his youth as a schoolteacher. Mariam softly recalled her mother's recipes, painting pictures of distant kitchens. Tunde boasted of the day he'd snuck into the National Theatre, pretending to be a performer. These fleeting moments of joy were precious, evidence that even in despair, life could briefly shimmer. As night fell, Amara realized something profound. The bridges under which they slept were more than concrete and steel. They were symbols, barriers, yet if she could endure, if she could persist, perhaps she could help others find their bridge, a passage from suffering to hope. With each passing day, Amara's resolve deepened. She began to gather small insights into the city's rhythms, where to seek shelter when rain threatened, the best times to approach sympathetic vendors, which police officers would turn a blind eye and which ones wouldn't. Lagos, once overwhelming, started to feel like a puzzle she could learn to solve. Piece by piece. She sat sometimes under the bridge, notebook in hand, scratching out fragments of her story, pencil scratching through the noise around her. She wrote about hope, about loss, about kindness and betrayal. With each word, she reclaimed a little piece of herself, refusing to let hardship erase who she was. The city had taken much from her, but it had also given her a rare, dangerous gift: empathy. She would find a way, somehow, to return to school, to wear the coat of healing, to become the person her parents imagined in their proudest dreams. As the moon rose behind the bridge, washing the city in silver, Amara whispered a vow. The city might forget her, but she would never forget her dreams, or the people who had taught her that even broken bridges could serve as paths to something bigger. Sometimes, amid the rough shuffle of city life, Amara would visit places that once whispered of happier days. One such place was the run-down library, several blocks from the bridge, a relic left over from a time when Lagos believed in public reading spaces. Broken windows let in the dust, and the shelves sagged under the weight of forgotten books, their spines faded and titles barely visible. Yet to Amara, it was a sanctuary. It was in these quiet moments that she nourished her spirit, immersing herself in biology textbooks and dog-eared detective stories alike. The librarian, an elderly man with keen, understanding eyes, looked the other way when she slipped inside without a library card. Sometimes, he would leave a bottle of water or a piece of bread on the desk as a silent offering. No words needed to be exchanged. In shared glances, both acknowledged a world where compassion still lived. The library was a time capsule, echoing with the laughter of children Amara had once joined, their dreams not yet wounded by circumstance. Surrounded by ink and paper, Amara could momentarily forget the ironic chasm between her aspirations and her reality. Lessons bloom. She scribbled notes from medical journals into her battered notebook, each fact and concept like a ladder rung that someday might help her climb out of the shadow. With every visit, she felt the gap between who she was and who she wanted to be become a little less daunting. But out on the streets, the urgent pulse of survival returned with full force. Amara's routines were wrapped around risk: the risk of hunger, the risk of violence, the risk of invisibility. Every day demanded courage. When dusk fell and shadows bled into every crevice, she sharpened her senses, knowing all too well that danger was always near. Yet clinging to hope made her brave. She watched for moments, fleeting as they were, where goodness might slip through the cracks. It was during this twilight hour that she often checked on her bridge companions. She'd listen for Baba's raspy wisdom, share gossip with Mariam, and, when Tunde was there, swap barters for trinkets or scraps of food. They had established a fragile peace, watching out for each other when the world seemed set on turning its back. Together, they repelled the sharpest cold, the darkest loneliness. The rituals of sharing and protecting, no matter how small, lent meaning to days that might otherwise blur or break. Each night, Amara tucked her notebook close to her chest before drifting into fitful sleep. Dreams were often interrupted by the lumber of trucks overhead or the scuttling feet of other wanderers. Yet she clung fiercely to her vision. Even in sleep, her mind wandered toward a future laced with healing, learning, and she hoped forgiveness. As rainy season deepened, fresh threats loomed. Floodwaters often turned streets into rivers. The air carried mold and the scent of rot. In these weeks, illness swept through the bridge dwellers, coughing fits and fevers replacing the usual laughter and banter. Amara's heart twisted each time she saw Mariam wheezing, or Baba slumped over, shivering from chills that would not abate. She felt a desperate impotence. Her knowledge from books wouldn't materialize into medicine. Her hands ached for tools she didn't possess. Still, she did what she could. With water boiled over a scavenged camp stove and rags torn from old shirts, Amara tried to relieve symptoms. She recalled passages from her biology books, improvising as best she could. Sometimes her actions brought comfort. Sometimes they were only small gestures against relentless suffering. She realized, with every fevered forehead she touched, that her calling was not just a distant future. It was here, beneath the bridge, right now. Being a healer could start even when you had nothing to give but your attention and kindness. If the city thought of its destitute as invisible, Amara knew otherwise. Each soul beneath the bridge carried a story worth telling, a story that someone, someday, needed to honor. One evening, a new crisis struck. Tunde, who disappeared for days, staggered back under the bridge, face swollen, blood trailing from a cut above his brow. The group gathered quickly, murmurs of outrage and worry swirling between them. Tunde gasped out his story. A run-in with older street boys. Territorial disputes over a lucrative begging spot. He'd refused to back down, and violence had followed. Without hesitation, Amara sprang into action. Her hands, deft from caring for Baba and Mariam, found cloth strips and bottled water. She cleaned Tunde's wound, staunching the bleeding despite his pained protests. "Hold still!" she commanded, her tone briefly that of the doctor she hoped to be. The others watched, a mixture of awe and concern coloring their faces. When the bleeding stopped, Amara pressed Tunde's hand. "You're stronger than you think," she murmured, and he managed a shaky smile in reply. As Tunde drifted into an exhausted sleep, Baba turned to Amara and spoke softly. "You're different, child. You don't belong to these shadows. You carry light in your hands. Never let the city steal it from you." His words settled in Amara's heart. For the first time, she wondered if she was indeed changing, not just inside, but in the way others saw her, too. Days continued to unwind, each one a strand of hope woven against resistance. News began to spread among the bridge dwellers of a new charity visiting the area. A small group of volunteers offering hot meals, medicine, and, critically, a listening ear. When the charity workers arrived, Amara watched cautiously at first. Their crisp shirts, kind smiles, and efficient movements marked them as outsiders. Yet their sincerity pierced the suspicious shell the street community had built up over time. A woman named Miss Kemi, a nurse, took a special interest in Amara after seeing her tending to Tunde and the others. "You're doing a good job with what you have," Miss Kemi said, her voice both gentle and determined. "But have you ever considered training? There are programs, scholarships even, for young people like you." For Amara, these words were electrifying. Could she dare to hope? A path back to dreams she thought forever lost? For days after, she replayed the conversation in her mind, questioning whether her luck could ever change, afraid to imagine a future brighter than the present. The idea twisted inside her like a seed suddenly awakened, half joy, half fear. But as she watched her friends heal, as warmth slowly crept into their lives thanks to the charity's help, Amara felt something shift. Maybe, just maybe, her journey beneath the bridge wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. That night under the bridge, as the city hummed above, Amara's mind raced. For hours, she weighed Miss Kemi's offer. Was it real? Could she risk hope after so many disappointments? Restlessness drove sleep away. She watched the moon shift from one concrete pillar to another, painting silvery lines across the dirty ground, and silently rehearsed her life story, its beginnings and heartbreaks, the faces of her parents smiling in memory, the sting of betrayal, and the makeshift family she'd found among the bridge's shadows. The pull to say yes grew stronger with every thought. She saw herself practicing under fluorescent hospital lights, her hands steady, her voice confident, as she treated wounds like Tunde's, no longer improvising with rags, but using real bandages, medicine, and knowledge. She imagined Mariam, perhaps, someday learning to read at her side, and Baba sharing his stories with children who came to the clinic for help. The vision was almost painful in its brightness. As dawn crept over Lagos, painting orange streaks over skyscrapers and shanties alike, Amara made a quiet vow. She would seek out Miss Kemi. She would take a step toward her dream, even if the ground felt uncertain beneath her feet. Facing change meant facing fear. When Amara found Miss Kemi near the market, helping to organize medical supplies, her heart hammered. Her voice nearly failed as she stepped forward, but she remembered the courage it took to tend Baba's fever, to hold Tunde's hand, to care for strangers when no one else would. "Miss Kemi," she began, her words trembling but clear, "I'd like to learn. I want to help people the way you do." Miss Kemi looked Amara over with a practiced nurse's eye, seeing beyond grime and worn clothes to the steadfastness burning within. She smiled, wide and genuine, and nodded. "That's all it takes to start. Just the willingness. There's a program, an evening class you can join. If you pass the basics, I'll help you apply for a scholarship. But you must promise not to give up. Not on others, not on yourself." Tears pricked Amara's eyes, relief and disbelief warring in her chest. She thanked Miss Kemi over and over, each repetition earnest, each one a small release from the weight she'd carried. It was the first real opportunity she'd been offered since her world had shattered, Amara threw herself into learning. Her hunger for knowledge greater than ever. Every evening, after hustling for daily survival, she walked miles to the charity's community center. She copied pages from medical texts, asked endless questions, and volunteered alongside the nurses whenever she could. It wasn't easy. Her body was always tired, and her mind occasionally faltered from stress and exhaustion. But the thrill of following her calling kept her going. At first, some doubted she could catch up. Older students whispered, skeptical sponsors raised eyebrows at the girl from under the bridge, yet Amara's persistence turned heads. On days when she struggled, she remembered the faces she'd cared for, the gratitude in Baba's eyes, the laughter she'd sparked in Tunde and Mariam, the silent thanks from strangers she had fed beneath the bridge. These memories steadied her. With every lesson learned, whether it was first aid, hygiene, or nutrition basics, she felt those invisible chains of circumstance weaken. Knowledge became her shield against the return of hunger, illness, and despair. Step by step, she was transforming into her vision of a healer. Time passed, and miracles, once unimaginable, began to unfold. Amara completed her program with honors, her name announced in front of volunteers and officials, her heart surging with pride and disbelief. Miss Kemi, steadfast as ever, wrote her a strong recommendation. The scholarship committee heard her story and, moved by her resilience, awarded her a full grant to enroll in a local nursing college. On graduation day, Amara wore a borrowed white blouse and pressed skirt, standing taller than she ever had. Her friends from under the bridge, Baba, Tunde, and Mariam, were waiting at the edge of the crowd, cheering louder than anyone. With them was the elderly woman Amara had once fed, now clean and robust, holding a bouquet as if to symbolize the cycle of care and kindness returned. For a moment, pain and hardship faded into applause and hope. Someone snapped a photo, Amara's face radiant, her friends beaming, even Miss Kemi tearful in the background. It was the image her parents would have cherished, a testament that their faith, their teachings, had lived on through every trial. Yet Amara's story did not end with triumphant graduation. The bridge and the people who had become her family remained part of her, an enduring reminder of why she chose this path. She began returning to Oshodi Bridge on weekends, this time armed not only with food, but with medical kits and knowledge. She set up small clinics, treating wounds, fevers, and listening to new stories. Her willingness to serve bridged divides of poverty and privilege, her presence beneath the overpass, a living example of hope's persistence. News of her work spread. More charities collaborated. Government officials occasionally visited. And for the young ones living rough, Amara became proof that hardship could be survived and transcended. The grace that underpinned her actions rippled outward, changing not only the bridge's community, but inspiring new volunteers to care for those so often left unseen. Amara's journey, once limited by hunger, rejection, and uncertainty, blossomed into a life of meaning. She knew hardship would undoubtedly revisit, for Lagos's shadows were never banished so easily. But now she faced them not as a victim, but as a healer, an advocate, and a guide. Every act of kindness she received and gave had brought her here, to this moment, where the city's heartbeat was no longer alien, but a song she sang with purpose. And under every bridge, in every forgotten corner, hope learned to persist. One life, one meal, one healing touch at a time.